Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. Now, people who are familiar with this channel, all six of you, will know very well that I talk a lot here about how Apple changed the music industry forever. When Napster came along in the late 90s, the music industry didn't know how to react. So rather than be rational and study the facts, they went all hysterical and they sued anything that moved within 3 yards of a peer-to-peer musical exchange. And as a result, the music industry may have won a few legal battles, but they lost the war. The music industry collapsed, and the only reason there's a shell of a music industry today is because Steve Jobs came up with a format to sell music online legally, but in a way that was cheap and convenient. And in doing so, in inventing iTunes, the driver's seat of the business end of music went from the record labels themselves to the tech companies. As I've said before, today the main drivers in music are companies like Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and others in the tech world, TikTok. They're not really the two remaining record conglomerates that are at this point glorified record-based PR agencies. But in the early 80s, the record industry was going strong, and big tech had a much different relationship to people than it did before. And that was because people like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak had ideals, and they lived by them many more than sort of later, more cynical people who shall remain unnamed. And part of this expressed itself in the form of the US Festival. Two music festivals, one in late 82, the other in early 83, that took place in a little old town called San Bernardino. And it was put on by Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, along with who co-founded it with Steve Jobs. And his idea was to create a kind of symbiotic atmosphere between a high-tech festival that offered the best in all displays of musical technology and performance art technology, but but at the same time recreated what we love about all good music festivals, a sense of a shared experience, a sort of community among the audience and among the bands. Now, it was really hot when it took place, but the 83 festival, the bigger of the two, was one where the money that Apple had, they weren't what they are today, but they were still a company. It allowed them to really put on a great day of music with a lot of variety. On that May festival, there was one day dedicated to new wave bands, which was the new sound of the time. People like In Excess, Wall of Voodoo, that's Mexican radio, Oingo Boingo, Science, Flock of Seagulls, because Iran is so far away, so why go to war over it? The English Beat, Stray Cats, Men at Work, The Clash. Then, of course, they had Rock Day on Monday, the 30th of May, and you had U2. That was before we found out what Bono was about. Stevie Nicks, Fleetwood Mac had actually played at the one in September of the previous year. David Bowie riding high at the time. Joe Walsh, life was good to him that day. So far, the Pretenders, they were on the chain gang. Missing Persons, hopefully they weren't walking from LA to San Bernardino. Berlin, you can't ride a metro there either. And of course, on Heavy Metal Day on Sunday, you had people like the Scorpions, yeah? You had a great Canadian band. We need to talk about them more. Triumph. Of course, Ozzy Osbourne riding high at the time. Quiet Riot, Felt the Noise, Motley Crue were there, and the headliner was Van Halen. Bootlegs of their performance there are all over the interweb. And they even, this was quite a lot of foresight, because country and rock remained quite segregated at this time, but they had at an otherwise rocky music festival a country day that had people like Hank Williams Jr. That was a few years before he was ready for some football. Alabama made the journey. The great Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, who was something of a crossover artist at the time, Ricky Skaggs, and of course the wonderful Emmylou Harris. Now, the festival was all filmed and it's been released over the years. I think it's well overdue for a re-release, but it was a unique festival because it left its mark on the era. And it was the festivals of the 90s, things like Woodstock 99 were mismanaged terribly, where this, it went pretty well. It was harder than hell, but it went pretty well. And it shows that the idealism of big tech before it got too big was quite complementary to the spirit of musicians. And that's why I think that as the record labels made a huge mistake in going after Napster, it's kind of fitting that Apple, when it was still led by a genius like Steve Jobs, all businessmen have intelligence to some degree, but Steve Jobs was a unique one. It's kind of unique that he had the last laugh after all that. As always, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.